Alright, so I'm jumping a little ahead. If you want to see how I got to this point, I have a previous video where I put on some seed gussets and new ball joints in advance of my new big brake kit that I'm going to put on, and then eventually 35s. So the first thing we're going to do is put the knuckles on. My new ball joints came with new castellated nuts, but if you don't, these are 7/8 inch and 1 1/8 inch sizes. And we're going to tighten the bigger one to 80 foot-pounds and the smaller one to 75 foot-pounds. Before we do that, we're going to go to the old knuckle, and there's a steering stopper. It's this bolt with a nut that's welded on, you can see right there, and we're going to put that in our new knuckle, and we'll test the steering to make sure that's still where we want it. But especially me with the hydraulic assisted steering, I need to make sure that that's just right. Both knuckles on. It took me a little longer than I wanted. These knuckle stopper bolts, you can see how they work. So they're 9/16 inch, but I had to use a tap to start the threads for this to thread in. So it's 24 threads per inch. And yeah, once I got it started, I was able to thread that in, but to get it on, I wasn't. And anyway, so I got these torqued, I got the cotter pins in, and now we're ready for the next part. So I threaded in the 3 unit bearing mounting bolts. They're 12.5 inch bolts, and so then I put the brake dust shield on, so it goes like this. So you kind of leave a hole where the caliper is going to go, and it bends out towards the inside of the car. So now we're going to mount our unit bearing. So I already previously bought these from Blackmagic Brakes, and they're a little bit ground down to fit the rotors. If you don't buy them directly from him and you just have your own unit bearings, you're going to have to grind down. Let me try to show you the edge a little bit, like around here, just to make it a little bit smaller to fit. But mine should already be good. So we're going to just basically just bolt this right up to these 3 holes and tighten it to 75 foot-pounds. Not to mention, you have to slide the axle shaft in first before you put this unit bearing in. And the top of the 3 bolts here, I couldn't get a torque wrench on, so I just used the 2 open-end wrench method and got it as tight as I could. But yeah, looking pretty good so far. What you're supposed to do is clean the surface of this, and then there are these rotor spacing rings that kind of just sit on here. And then the rotors themselves, you're supposed to clean with a detergent. I just used some Agent Orange soap. So clean and dry these, and then we're going to mount these, and we want to tighten them down. So I've got some lug nuts. You need some lug nuts that aren't going to bottom out on the stud. So something like this. Or some just, I think, 1/2 inch nuts will work just fine. Yeah, so we're going to put both rotors on and tighten them down. So next we're getting about to installing the actual calipers. You can ignore the part in the direction where it talks about a piloted spacer. With these Super 16s, that spacer is this little nub right here that's built in. So we're going to install these with these bolts. They're 18 millimeters with some Loctite that came with the kit, torquing them to 110 foot-pounds. Just note, whenever you're installing, the bleeder nipple, which is on the back of the caliper, should be at the top. So that's how you'll know which one's driver and passenger side. So this one should be the passenger side, and it's going to go like this. And we're going to attach it to the knuckle right there. Next, I removed the caliper. There are 2 14 millimeter slide bolts, and then we're putting in the brake pads with these abutment clips. So this is what they look like. So they kind of fits right into the top and bottom, and then this should point to the outside of the brake pad. And the only way I was able to fit it in, so you got to put the pad in first, and then kind of just lean an edge out and put the abutment clip on, and then do the same for the bottom. And so the abutment clip should basically be putting force to spring the pad away from the rotor. And so we're going to do that all 4, and then squeeze the caliper over both pads. You can see I can kind of squeeze it in towards the rotor. So squeeze both pads in, put the rotor on, and remount these the slide bolts and torque them to 17 foot-pounds. So this is all pretty much fully done. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, stuff that I removed in the other video, I'm going to replace the ball joints for the tie rod and drag link ends. Tighten these down to 55 foot-pounds. Blaine's kit was even nice enough to come with new cotter pins that I'll put in. And then we're going to put on the axle nut. Oh, by the way, these are 3/4 inches. So then we're going to put on the axle nut, which is this giant guy right here. It's a 36 millimeter, and tighten that to 175 foot-pounds. My little tip: if you don't have someone to hold the brakes, or your brakes aren't set up yet, like mine, and you're trying to tighten this axle nut, I wedge in basically a long rod or my breaker bar in here, so that way when I'm tightening it, the wheel can't spin. So now that I'm done with all that, I'm going to readjust my toe in. I have a video specifically covering that, but basically we're measuring the distance between, I like to use basically a point on the rotor here. It should be the same on both sides, in the front and then as well in the back. And you want the front to be slightly narrower, so the tires should point in towards each other by about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch, and you can adjust that with the tie rod because it's double threaded. So there are some basically clamps here that you can undo, and then get a pipe wrench and spin the tie rod one way or another to either, it's double threaded on different ways on either side, so turning it one way will move the wheels basically further apart, and one way will pull them together. So we're going to adjust that now while everything's nice and open and easy to adjust. Next, we're going to remove this fitting where the brake fluid actually comes into the caliper, the piston here. This is a 1/2 inch, this is a 9/16 inch, and we're going to tighten it to 30 foot-pounds or until it stops leaking. So it came with the bolt that goes through here is called a banjo bolt. It's a special bolt that's drilled through the center, and it has a little hole through there, and so one washer will go on either side of the fitting, and then yeah, we're going to put that in, and we've got a container to catch some brake fluid because we're going to drip some. If your kit came with the new master cylinder, we're going to bench bleed that first. If not, you can skip right ahead to just bleeding the individual brakes, and you should only have to bleed the front two and not worry about the rear. But so for bench bleeding, so this kit came with a new master cylinder, so we've got it locked in a vise by this lip where it's the mounting lip basically. So it should come with 2 plugs to cap these ports. However, mine came with 2 of the identical plug, and these ports are different sizes, so I had to find my own bolt, and we're going to see if that's liquid tight. I don't know. We'll see. Otherwise, I'm going to have to try to find another plastic cap to cap this. And this is obviously bad because we might be getting dirt in there. I'm going to have to try to clean it out as well, but we'll see. Anyway, so here's your master cylinder. So there's a little piston here that I can actually just push in by hand. You don't want to push it in much more than an inch. But basically, we're going to bleed it by forcing the air out. So what we want to do is close this off. We're going to put in brake fluid and fill it up about 3/4 of the way. We're going to push in the piston just a bit, like maybe 1/2 inch. Let it out, let it sit for 15 seconds or so, and you'll see bubbles come out as you push it in and release. And we're going to repeat that over and over until there are no more bubbles, and that's basically it. It's basically bench bled at that. I've also heard you can kind of tap the outside of it to shake some bubbles free if they get trapped in any nooks or crannies. But yeah, should be pretty easy. The screw I had in there didn't work, so I got pretty clever using like a little plug and then this clamp. Anyway, this is bled now, so we're going to basically get that prepped, and we're going to remove this one. So there are 2 1/2 inch nuts that hold the bracket that hold this one in, and then we're just going to, as quickly as possible, remove these I guess they're called double flares, I think, that go into this, and just pop in the new master cylinder. We've got the new larger bore master cylinder installed. It took me a little bit longer than I'd like. So these, I looked online, everyone says they're 7/16 inch, but I really could not fit that size on there. I got a 15/32 inch wrench on there, but then I didn't have that in the, so you want these flare nut wrenches that are specifically designed to go over the wire that holds the brake fluid, and then get a more full grip than just an open end wrench. So I ended up having to buy this set and use the 12 millimeters in order to get those loose. But yeah, so I eventually got them loose and just pretty much swapped it. I did have to unbolt the cruise control and fuel purge solenoid just to get some room to get it out, but that might change based on what fenders you have. But anyway, yeah, so that's all good. So now we're just going to bleed the brakes and then do the braking process, and that's about it. So I'm not going to go into it super in detail. I have a whole nother video for that. But basically, there's a valve on the back of every caliper that you're going to open up with another flare nut wrench. and have someone, so first someone steps on the brakes, then you open it up and the fluid will start to flow and you look for bubbles, and then you close the valve and then they let off the brakes, and you're basically going to rinse and repeat that, starting as far away from the master cylinder as possible, starting here, then going to the driver's side rear, and then passenger front, and then driver's front, until there's no more air in the system. You're bleeding the air out of the system. So after I bled the brakes, that's pretty much it. I got on the 35s. These are the Rockstar XT811s. I painted, and the insert here, and these things. And yeah, it's been a long time, but I've been working up to these 35s, and I like it. Looks good. Now, there is a break-in procedure, basically a bunch of driving that Blackmagic Brakes prescribes to break in the rotors and pads that I'll do, but yeah, that's it.